Well, here we are, folks. We're going to talk about victims of serial killers today. So, a lot of the information that we have about the victims of serial killers comes from news reports or police data. Actually, most of it comes from police data. And what we're going to do here today is we're going to, in many cases, but not all cases, we're going to compare serial killing statistics regarding their victims to that of the victims of regular murder, right? And I think when you look at the victim side of things, you see a lot of stark differences between serial killers and regular murderers, right? Now, there are some similarities as well, and we're going to cover those. Like, for instance, one of the main similarities between serial killing and regular murder is that they are both following the same general trends. When one goes up, the other goes up as well. And when one goes down, the other goes down as well. And that's why it is important to look at victims, because when victims are easier to target, then killings go up. Okay? So some general trends in serial killing over the last 20 years. We've seen fewer numbers of victims per offender, meaning that people are getting caught faster. So serial killers might kill 2 people or 3 people and then get caught, whereas before in the 70s and 60s and so on, they would kill more people before they get caught. And this is predominantly because of technology. We've covered this before, but for instance, police reports and stuff were written in paper, in pen or pencil. They weren't typed up. They weren't in shared databases. They were difficult to access if you're not within that actual jurisdiction. And so now that things are more connected, it's easier to catch people. And so therefore, we're seeing fewer numbers of victims per offender. We're also seeing fewer cases of female victims. We're seeing an increase in male victims, right? And this might be because there's a general shift in and how these crimes are committed. For instance, we're seeing more we're seeing killers using more guns now than stabbing or strangulation, which might imply that more people who are killing or being killed are killed within a sort of drug deal setting or gang war type of setting. And so therefore, males are more likely to be a part of that. And so we're seeing people hit that serial killer definition of killing 2 or more people for instrumental reasons, whereas the serial killers back in the day would focus more on women because they saw them as easier targets, and a lot of times their killing were not instrumental. And so we might be seeing, and this is not this is just my interpretation of the data. It is not a specific fact necessarily. It's just this is how I make sense of the facts that we know, and that is there are more shooting cases now. There increase in female victims, increase in male victims, and a decrease in female victims. We're also seeing fewer strangers and more family being targeted. And we're seeing fewer cases of prostitutes being singled out. And again, that goes with my theory of maybe we are seeing an increase in instrumental homicide among serial killers. Some place-based factors. We know that most of our serial killing victims come from California, New York, Texas, and Florida. And that makes sense because those are some of our largest population centers in the country, so that comes to no surprise. We know that about 25% of victims were killed in specific places, such as what John Wayne Gacy did. 40% of victims are killed by local killers, meaning killers who are in their general area. 35% are killed by traveling killers. Now, this is a trend that's slightly going down because it is becoming more difficult for people to be killing on the road as it used to be in like the 60s and 70s. We're seeing about 2/3 of serial killers who like to stay in their own area, right? So now the focus again is on serial killers, right? They like to kill in places where they're comfortable, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. And then about half of victims are killed in the home of the killer, while 50% are killed outside, meaning that even if you're a traveling killer, if you're a local killer, if you're a place specific killer, about 50-50, 50% of the time the killer will take the victim to their actual house for the killing. And that's what, Jeffrey Dahmer did that a lot, right? He would lure people to his house, with the implication that there would be some sort of sexual relations, and then he would end up killing them there. So when it comes to victim selection, compared to regular murderers, now these are just murderers who don't kill more than 2 people in different settings, serial killers like to kill strangers more than regular killers, right? 61% of serial killers have killed strangers only. Males are far more likely to kill strangers than women, and then about a quarter killed one or more acquaintance, while only 15% a family member, and 76% killed at least one stranger. And the reason for this is, and we're going to see this a lot when we look at other factors, right? Serial killers evolve, right? Like think about any hobby that you have, right? Or anything that you've done. For instance, I remember when I first started playing guitar, I started learning on a classical guitar, right, with nylon strings. And the problem with that was that the fretboard, in my opinion, was too thick, right? And I didn't like it. And so one day I went over to a friend's house, and he had an acoustic steel string guitar. Now, that I enjoyed playing a lot more because it sounded different, the strings were made of steel, and the fretboard was thinner, right? And so I ended up buying a acoustic steel string guitar, and I played guitar on that for a very, very long time. And then at some point in my life, right, I was introduced to electric guitars, and I realized that because I learned my technique on an acoustic guitar, I was able to enjoy and play the electric guitar very well, right? But I still prefer playing a steel string acoustic guitar. The thing is, killing works the same way, right? You might kill the first time, maybe it's a family member or maybe it's someone close to you, but you realize, that's not so much what I like. Maybe I'll start killing a stranger, right? And so killing, very much like any other form of human practice, sort of evolves, and then people find their niche. People find what they like, right? Another way to think of it is, usually when I go to Chipotle, I order a burrito bowl, okay, with black beans, with the brown rice, with sofritas, and then I get all the salsas, no sour cream, I get guacamole, fajita veggies, and I add lettuce, right? But there have been some times in the last year, right, where I said, you know what, instead of sofritas this time, I'm going to get the chicken. Or there was even another time 2 years ago where I was like, you know what? I'm feeling real froggy. I'm getting sour cream and guacamole and cheese, right? So that's the thing, right? You have your thing that you like, right? My thing is sofritas, all the salsas, no cheese, no sour cream, add guac, right? That's what I usually go with. But every now and then, I'll have chicken, or I'll have all the saturated fat on there. And so killing works the exact same way. Even though I might specialize in killing women who are strangers, every now and then I might be compelled to kill a man or to kill someone I know. For instance, the BTK killer, his very first kill, he had to kill an adult man, which was not his MO at all, but he had to do that out of necessity because he didn't realize the dad of the family he went to go murder would be home during that day. Right, so he ended up killing the dad as well. And I actually have uploaded a complete confession of all the killings of the BTK killer on Blackboard that you can watch. When it comes to victim selection, most serial killers again, remember, they like killing, all right? Killing to them brings joy. It brings some form of emotional satisfaction, right? Most serial killers, sorry, let me rephrase that. Many serial killers do not prefer to kill for instrumental reasons, unless they're in some sort of a drug cartel, organized crime, or gang, right? And so most of the time, they seek out victims that are easy to kill. So they're looking for people who are either less intelligent or less physically powerful, or even in some cases, less visible by the law, such as prostitutes. So when it comes to strangers, they like to kill women, children, and travelers, right? These are people, again, that are in a position where they're not as aware of, like a traveler, for instance, might not be as aware of the location where they're in, right? I remember one time my wife and I were driving around in South Africa, and our GPS took us down the wrong highway, and we ended up in an area where it was quite dangerous for us to be, right? Children are obviously don't know what's going on as much, and then women are generally perceived as physically weaker than most than men by serial killers. Whether that is actually true or not doesn't matter, but that's the perception that exists among serial killers. When serial killers kill acquaintances, they like to kill their friends, children, or women. Okay, so that's sort of and again, you kill your friend because your friend trusts you, right? So now you've gained their trust, which makes them more vulnerable, and you can kill them, right? Again, same thing with children and women. If you don't have their trust entirely, you might perceive children and women as less of a barrier to you killing them than men. Again, these are just serial killer perceptions, not necessarily objectively true. When serial killers kill family, they kill their own children, their husbands, and wives. That's pretty self-explanatory, because there's really no other thing that you could kill in your family. So when it comes to the victim's age, we don't see any real differences from general trends in murder, right? So like any other murderer, will sort of follow the same, you'll see sort of the same victim age percentages in general murder than you would in serial killing. What we are seeing with both serial murder and regular murder is an increase in the elderly being killed, especially in nursing homes. Now, this is, we can attribute this, again, this is my interpretation of the data. There hasn't, to my knowledge, been any strong causation proved through science, but what would make sense, an explanation of these data might be that the baby boomer generation is now getting old. They are not being able to be taken care of at home, so they're sent to nursing homes. Nursing homes are becoming overwhelmed and overstaffed, and so it creates more opportunity. Understaffed and overwhelmed, whatever. And that creates more opportunity for these people to now be victimized, right? So it's just it's a numbers game. You're putting more people in nursing homes that don't necessarily have the capacity for all these people, and so now you are putting more stress on workers. You're also creating more general opportunity, just a pure numbers game, right? More people are getting old, and so there's more opportunity for them to be victimized. And that would also explain why we don't see any differences between, serial murder and regular murder when it comes to them. But most victims of murder are young adults, right, middle-aged, and so most serial killers have killed at least one person in that age range. About 5% of serial killers have killed only children, 6% only teenagers, and then 5% only the elderly, right? And again, it comes to availability of victims, and most of the time, people in their in their late teens through their mid 30s are more available, especially during the times when it's easier to get away with murder, right? Weekend evenings and nights, right? That's when it's easiest to get away with murder, and that's when these people are more likely to be out and about compared to elderly, teenagers, and children. Only 36% of serial killers killed only adults. And again, this might be because of instrumental reasons. For instance, like, someone might go into a house in order to kill let's say a woman, but then there are children there, and so now they had to kill them out of necessity, right? While others might go to just kill the children, and now they see, oh, there's mom, I need to take her out now, right? And that's, and again, similar to the story about about BTK, right? He popped into this house, didn't realize dad was going to be there. And so normally he wouldn't kill men, but he had to kill him there, right? And then 37% have killed a teenager at least once, while 16% have killed somebody in the elderly community at least once. Again, killing, it's, there's two things that can explain this, right? It's the instrumental reasons, but then there's also the experimental reasons, right? You might usually eat your Chipotle bowl with sofritas, but every now and then you might want to try barbacoa or, I don't know, carnitas, or whatever, right? One area where there are significant differences between general murder and serial murder is when it comes to gender, right? Serial killers are far more likely to kill women than they are men. And when it comes to regular murder, men are typically victimized more often than women. So about 2/3 of serial killers have killed a woman at least once, while only 47 have killed males at least once. And that's the thing, right? That oftentimes serial killers will view women as an easier target, but then a man will be there and they will need to take them out solely because of instrumental reasons. 39% only killed women, while 21% only killed men, with 40% killing both. We do notice, though, that when the victims are younger, there's less variability between gender, and again, this can be explained by the perception that serial killers have of children and women being weaker, right? The being easier targets. And so when you are dealing with a younger victim, it doesn't matter what their gender is, but the older they get, the more you want to focus on the victim that you perceive as weak, whether that is actually the truth or not. We also see some differences in victim facilitation, meaning what victim factors are very important in their victimization. Now, this doesn't mean that, this is not victim blaming. It's just looking at sort of objectively, okay, when we look at all the victims of serial killers, these are some factors that stand out. When we look at the characteristics of general murderers, these are some factors that stand out. When it comes to general murder, some of the factors that stand out are being spouses, being confrontational, being drunk, delivering the first blow, or lifestyles that mirror that of the assailant. For instance, if you're a drug dealer, you might be murdered by another drug dealer, right? If you are involved in gang or organized crime, you might be taken out by someone in a gang or organized crime. When it comes to serial murder, only about 15% of these victims were highly facilitative, meaning that a lot of these attacks, there's nothing that you could have done to avoid being killed. Okay? The only things that seem to matter is your overall lifestyle and your profession, right? And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But 66% of these victims were lowly facilitative, right? And so what it comes down to, right, is that you're at the wrong place at the wrong time. Somebody wanted to kill, and they saw you, right? And that was it. Nothing that you really did, right? Only 15% are highly facilitated, meaning that they're either drunk or they're confrontational or they're causing some sort of problem that's making their lives more difficult, that's opening them up to victimization, right? So that is the main difference, is that serial killers, right, there's really not much we can say to victims to say, hey, this is how you avoid getting killed by a serial killer. And that's what makes them so scary. So some terminology we should know when it comes to missing and murdered children. So runaways are children who voluntarily leave their home without permission from their parents, while parental abductions is when children are taken by a parent or a non-custodial parent who does not have legal guardianship, meaning like if the law says, okay, you've lost the rights to have your children, or maybe you've had a divorce and there are certain times of the week when you are supposed to give your kids to your spouse and you take them, right? That can be considered a parental abduction. Relative abductions is when someone who's not a parent, also not a legal guardian, takes a child from that guardian. Discarded children are children who are forced to leave their homes by their parents, right? So they're rejected by them. Disposable children are children who are murdered by their parents or their legal guardians. While stranger abductions, these are children who are taken by a stranger. And then an abbreviated abduction is children who are abducted for just a short period of time and then they're usually released, right? And these are some of the abductions that are seldom not recorded in police records, so we don't really know what the actual situation is with those. And then you have aborted abductions. These are children who manage to escape their attempted kidnapping, right? There's some videos that have been circulating on TikTok and on YouTube lately showing some of those. And I'll tell you, child abduction is a parent's worst nightmare. When it comes to some of these statistics, we know that about 1 in 7 students have received some form of sexual solicitation. However, we generally think that these numbers are lower than what they actually are. It might be that a lot of children, especially during that age, don't tell the authorities about it. They don't tell their parents about it, or they might not even realize they've been sexually solicited online. 4% receive aggressive sexual solicitation. So this is usually when someone asks to meet you, or they send you gifts or physical mail, or they call you on the phone. About 34% had some sort of unwanted exposure to sexual material. So this is when you get an unsolicited picture of private parts sent to you, and this is increasing now with the use of smartphones. Like back in like the 90s, it was very difficult to send this stuff, but now it's a whole lot easier. But only about 27% of these people actually would report these unwanted experiences to their parents, and that's the thing why we think a lot of these numbers that we have are slightly reduced, or are slightly conservative. We don't know how much this is actually happening. This just gives us a pretty conservative estimate. About 20% of girls versus 10% of boys will experience some form of sexual abuse during their childhood, right? Whether it is something such as fondling, or whether it's more serious, which is, that's a fifth of girls. When parents kill their children, most of the time it's boys. We also know that the U.S. has the highest child murder rate in the developed world, and we don't necessarily know what exactly explains that, but we do know that we don't have as many programs for parents who can't have their children, or for parents who don't have the ability to take care of their children. We don't have as many programs for poor people as other countries, other developed nations do. So that might explain some of it. And then stranger abduction. I know we always fear, stranger abduction, but the chances of stranger abduction happening to one of your children or to a child are much lower than being kidnapped by someone that you know. And in fact, children are much more likely victimized by their own family than they are of strangers, right? And that's one of the biggest misconceptions that we have, is we have the stranger danger fear, but no, it's family. Family is who victimizes you, especially when you're a child. Like I said earlier, serial killers like to kill people they perceive as weak, right? And so when it comes to younger people, they tend to focus less on gender, but then the older they get, they will move to women as opposed to men. About a quarter of serial killers have killed at least one child, and then of which 74% are male. Mostly white killers, and they tend to kill white victims. Males who kill children tend to bludgeon or mutilate or strangle them, while women use poison. And we also see women using poison more often on adults as well. Males are more likely to seek out children who don't live in their general area. But when they kill the children, they do it in their own location. So they will snatch them where they are and then bring them to an area where it's more convenient for them to kill, right? And location is very important, right? Think about any crime that you commit, right? You're more comfortable committing a crime in an area where you know the lay of the land, right? For instance, think a little bit about how you speed, right? When you're driving, right? You're more likely to drive fast in a location that you know, because you can much better anticipate where the police might be, right? What the chances are of you getting caught in certain locations. Same thing works with smoking weed. Same thing works with doing other types of drugs. Same thing works with stealing. Same thing works with serial murder. Compared to women, males tend to kill children more for sexual gratification, while women are more likely to do it for financial reasons. And then there is also a subset of both male and female killers who just enjoy the sadistic nature of killing children. When it comes to those serial killers who kill women, there are two primary sort of hypotheses, right? And that is that, so they get sexual gratification from it, not only from a sort of sexual assault perspective, but also from the fact that they are killing a person who they are sexually attracted to, okay? And then there's the other hypothesis that says that women are easier targets, right? And because they are perceived as sort of weaker than men. And again, this is not necessarily an objective truth. It is a perceived truth by serial killers. Prostitutes have generally been the victim of choice for serial killers, especially through to the 90s. But over the last 20 years, we've seen a significant reduction in these types of victims. And I think it likely has to do with the internet. Because prostitutes now can use the internet to screen their customers, which they couldn't do before. If you're on the street, right, whoever rolls up, you get into their car and then you go somewhere. But with the internet now, you can advertise your services online. You can meet in a location that's safe for you. You can sort of ask this person questions. You can screen them a little bit better. And you can charge higher prices, right? So prostitution as an industry is moving online, and therefore it is becoming more difficult for these women predominantly to be killed by killers. Also, killing is becoming more difficult to get away with. Prostitutes also have a paraphilic appeal, though, right? There are some killers who wanted to rid the world of prostitutes, while other killers had a specific attraction to prostitutes, right? And then the thing is, there's also this dehumanized aspect to prostitutes. Some serial killers view prostitutes as less than human, right? They're less alive and therefore they're less dead. So it's easier to kill these sort of social throwaways, right? And therefore it's easier to dehumanize them. It's easier to justify their death, right? They're less alive and therefore less dead. But I think the most prominent reason for why prostitutes have been the victim of choice is because their job is literally to avoid the police. Their job is to stay away from detection. So they literally put themselves in a position where it's easier for them to be victimized because you're constantly trying to avoid the police, trying to avoid people that can actually help you from not being victimized, right? And I think that's why prostitutes are such an easy target. Also, especially back in the 60s and 70s, a lot of these people were runaways, right? Society had already written them off. They weren't trying to be found by their family or by their friends or by anyone. So people would likely not even know where you are. People wouldn't go looking for you, right? You wouldn't be considered a missing person. So then when it comes to the elderly, we are seeing an increase in this. And these victims can be either living alone or be institutionalized. But we are seeing an increase in elderly victims. And this might, again, as I said earlier, and we don't have a true scientific explanation for this yet, but it might just be that there are more elderly people now. The baby boomers have gotten older. And so now there are just more victims to select from, to choose from, right? And also, elderly are considered to be weaker, too. We find that most male offenders who kill elderly people do it for paraphilic tendencies, meaning there's some sort of sexual motive behind the murders. And they tend to mostly kill elderly women. There's sometimes, again, sexual assault involved, and then also, in very few cases, even torture. These people are considered very powerless, and some serial killers very much enjoy this sadistic nature of completely overpowering and dominating someone before you decide when to end their life. With that being said, that is victims of serial killers. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me or comment in below or whatever. Other than that, chill vibe.